She fell asleep on a billionaire's shoulder. What happened on the train left her speechless. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The train rattled softly through the quiet city night, its fluorescent lights flickering over rows of tired faces. Mia sat near the window, her head heavy from another 14-hour day. Her hands smelled faintly of coffee grounds and cleaning solution, her shoes, still damp from the rain, pressed against the cold metal floor. She was just trying to stay awake long enough to make it to her stop, but the gentle sway of the train was stronger than her will. Next to her sat a man in a dark coat, phone in hand, earbuds tucked neatly under his collar. His posture was calm, composed, the kind of quiet confidence that made people automatically give him space. But Mia didn't notice any of that. Her eyelids fluttered, and before she realized it, her shoulder brushed his arm. The warmth was unexpected, steady, almost comforting. Within seconds, her head slipped sideways and came to rest against his shoulder. The man stiffened slightly, glancing down. Her hair smelled like rain and cheap lavender shampoo. A small sketchbook lay on her lap, its pages bent at the corners, a pencil still clutched between her fingers. For a moment, he considered waking her. But when the train rocked again and she sighed softly, something in that sound so weary, so human made him stop. He exhaled, pulled the edge of his coat up, and gently draped it over her. Outside, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. The woman across the aisle smiled faintly, watching the scene unfold like something out of a movie. The man looked away, pretending not to notice. When the announcement chimed for the next station, Mia stirred. Realizing what had happened, she jolted upright, mortified. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she stammered, brushing at her hair. "I must have fallen asleep." The man smiled, calm, his voice low and even. "It's all right. Long day?" She nodded, cheeks burning. "Something like that." She gathered her things in a rush, clutching her sketchbook like a shield. The train slowed, screeching softly as it pulled into the station. She muttered another apology and hurried out into the cool night air, her reflection flashing briefly in the glass as the doors slid shut behind her. The man watched her go, eyes lingering on the empty seat she'd left behind. A faint smile touched his lips, one of curiosity more than amusement. He glanced down at his shoulder, at a single strand of her dark hair that had caught on his coat, and carefully brushed it away. Somewhere between the next stations, his phone buzzed with another board meeting reminder, but for the first time in a long while, he ignored it. The rhythmic clatter of the tracks filled the silence, steady and unbroken, carrying them both toward a future neither of them could have imagined. The following night, the same city lights flickered through the windows of the late train, painting streaks of gold across the seats. Mia sat once again near the window, her reflection faint against the dark glass. The day had drained her more than usual. She had covered an extra shift at the cafe and spent the afternoon filling out hospital paperwork for her mother. Her hands ached, but she refused to fall asleep this time. She told herself she would stay awake all the way home. Yet when the train swayed and the wheels hummed beneath her, her eyes began to blur. Then she saw him again. The man from last night. He sat a few seats away, reading something on his phone, earphones in. The same calm presence she remembered. Her heart gave a strange, nervous flutter. What were the odds of seeing him twice on the same route? She looked down quickly, pretending to scroll through her own phone, but she could feel his glance. When their eyes met, he smiled politely, just enough to make her blush. The train jolted suddenly, and the sketchbook in her lap slipped to the floor. Before she could reach for it, he was already leaning down, picking it up. "You dropped this," he said, handing it back. His voice sounded exactly as she remembered, steady, kind, just a little amused. "Thank you," she murmured, clutching it. He looked at the sketchbook's worn cover. "Do you draw?" She hesitated, unsure if it was worth explaining to a stranger. "A little. Just people on the train. Faces that disappear before I ever know their names." He tilted his head. "That sounds beautiful, actually." She smiled, surprised. No one had ever said that to her before. The train slowed for the next station, and before she could answer, he stood. "This is my stop," he said, then paused. "Try to stay awake this time." She laughed softly. I will. But when she looked up again, he was gone, and all she could see was his reflection fading in the window. Later that night, in her small apartment near the tracks, Mia flipped through her sketchbook. On one page, between charcoal smudges and pencil lines, was a faint scent of his cologne on the paper where he had touched it. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about it. He was probably just some office worker catching the same train home, nothing more. The next evening, the train was packed, the air thick with the smell of wet coats and coffee. Mia squeezed into a corner seat, sketchbook open on her lap. Halfway through the ride, a familiar voice spoke above the noise. Mind if I sit here? She looked up. It was him again. She moved her bag aside, heart racing a little too fast. I guess we have the same schedule, he said with a small smile. Seems like it, she replied, trying to sound casual. As the train rattled on, they talked. About coffee that never tastes the same twice. About late nights that never end. About how strange it is to share a quiet space with strangers every day. He listened more than he spoke, his attention focused entirely on her. When he asked about her art, she shyly showed him one page, a sketch of the train interior, a woman asleep on someone's shoulder. That is you, isn't it? He asked softly. Her face turned red. Maybe, she admitted. He chuckled, but his tone was gentle. It is a good picture, real, honest. They fell into a silence that felt comfortable. For a while, the world outside the train did not exist. When the announcement for her stop echoed overhead, she stood quickly. I should go. Wait, he said, reaching for something. He held out her pencil, the one that had rolled under his seat. You will need this. She smiled, taking it. Thank you again. Anytime, he replied. As the doors closed behind her, she glanced back through the glass. He was still there, watching her go, the faintest smile on his face. And though neither of them knew it yet, that quiet train ride had just changed both of their lives forever. Over the next week, the train became a strange sort of meeting place for Mia and the man she now knew as Ethan. Every evening, as the city lights began to blur through the rain-streaked windows, she would board the same car, hoping he might be there. Sometimes he was, sometimes he was not. But when he was, he always greeted her with that calm smile that made the noise of the world seem a little quieter. One night, the train was unusually empty, the sound of the wheels echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. Mia sat sketching the faint outlines of sleeping passengers, the way their tired faces softened under the fluorescent lights. She looked up when she heard his voice. You really do see beauty everywhere, do you not? Ethan slid into the seat across from her, resting his briefcase on his knees. Not everywhere, she replied with a shy grin. Just where people forget to look. He studied her for a moment, impressed by the sincerity in her tone. Then maybe you are seeing what the rest of us have forgotten. They talked easily, as if they had known each other for years. She told him about her mother's illness, about the endless bills, about how art was the only thing that made her feel alive. He listened carefully, his eyes never leaving her face. When he asked what she truly wanted, she said quietly, to have my own gallery one day, just a small one. A place where people like me can hang their stories on the wall. Her words lingered in the air like a wish. When the train reached her stop, she gathered her things. Ethan stood as well. Do you always take this route? He asked. She nodded. Every night. He smiled. Then maybe I will too. The next few nights he was true to his word. Sometimes he brought her coffee, sometimes a small snack, sometimes just silence. They shared stories about strangers on the train, laughing softly at the odd moments of city life. The walls between them began to fade, replaced by something warm and steady. Yet, even in his gentleness, there was a mystery about him. His phone rang often, and each time, his expression shifted from light to distant, the way someone looks when they carry a world they cannot share. One evening, as the train rolled through the outskirts, a group of noisy teenagers stumbled into the car. One of them bumped into Mia, knocking her sketchbook to the ground. Before she could react, Ethan had already stood up, his voice firm but controlled. Watch where you are going, he said. The boys mumbled apologies and hurried off at the next stop. Mia picked up her sketchbook, a page torn loose. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan handed her the torn sheet, smoothing the crease gently. You should not let anyone ruin your art, he said softly. Or your peace. She smiled faintly. You sound like someone who has seen both. His eyes darkened, a flicker of pain quickly hidden. Maybe I have. The rest of the ride passed in silence, but a quiet understanding settled between them. When the train stopped at the final station, he walked her to the platform. The air smelled like steel and rain. "I will see you tomorrow?" she asked without realizing the hope in her voice. "You will," he replied, and for the first time, she saw something almost fragile in his smile. As the train doors closed behind him, Mia felt a warmth she had not known in a long time. She clutched her sketchbook close, unaware that the man she was slowly falling for was not just another commuter, but someone whose name appeared daily in the headlines of a world far above her own. The following Friday, the city was drowning in rain. Umbrellas turned inside out on the crowded platforms, and the metallic scent of wet steel filled the air. Mia hurried into the station, clutching her sketchbook under her coat. The last thing she expected was to find Ethan standing by the vending machine, hands in his pockets, looking as though he had been waiting for her. "You are soaked," he said, smiling as he offered her a paper cup of hot chocolate. "So are you," she laughed, brushing rain from her hair. They took their seats near the back of the train, where the glass fogged up with every breath. Outside, lightning flickered over the skyline. Inside, their small world felt suspended somewhere between calm and confession. For a while, neither spoke. Then Ethan asked, "Mia, have you ever thought about showing your work publicly?" She blinked, surprised. "My sketches? They are not professional. I draw because I cannot afford therapy." He chuckled softly. "Maybe that is why people would love them. They are real." She tilted her head, studying him. "Why do you care so much about what I draw?" He hesitated, then said, "Because the world you see feels honest. I spend my days surrounded by people who build, buy, and sell things. But you notice the kind of beauty that cannot be owned." The words settled deep inside her, warming her in a way the hot chocolate could not. She smiled. "That is the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." When the train slowed at the next stop, a burst of wind swept through the car. Her sketchbook slid from her lap to the floor. Ethan picked it up, but before handing it back, a page caught his attention. It was a drawing of him, sitting by the train window, half smiling, his eyes somewhere far away. "You drew me?" he said quietly. Mia froze. "It is nothing, just practice." He looked down at the drawing again, then handed it to her carefully. "It is more than that." For a moment, their eyes met, and the air between them shifted. It was not just attraction, it was recognition. Two lonely souls who had accidentally found a rhythm that made sense. The train lurched again, breaking the silence. A voice over the speakers announced a service delay, trapping them together for another 15 minutes. Ethan leaned back, glancing out the window. "Maybe the train knows we needed more time," he said, smiling faintly. Mia laughed. "Maybe the train is tired of carrying secrets." He raised an eyebrow. "Secrets? Everyone here has one," she said. "You can see it in their faces, people running from something, or toward something." He looked down, his smile fading slightly. "And which one do you think I am doing?" She studied him, sensing something behind his calm exterior. "Running from something," she said softly. "But I do not think you will tell me what." He did not answer. Instead, he pulled a small card from his pocket and slid it across the table between them. "Just in case you ever want to share your art with the world," he said. It was a business card, plain and simple, embossed with a logo she did not recognize and a name she barely glanced at before tucking it into her bag. "Thank you," she said, her voice small. "I mean it." When the train finally reached her stop, she stood, reluctant to go. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "Absolutely," he replied. As she walked away, Ethan stayed seated, staring out the fogged window. The reflection in the glass showed not just the man on the train, but the headlines he could never escape, the ones that read Ethan Cole, CEO of Cole Transit Group. He closed his eyes and exhaled, whispering to himself, "Just a little longer, before she finds out who I really am." Outside, the train doors shut, and the city swallowed the sound as if keeping his secret for one more night. The next few days passed in a blur of rain, coffee, and train rides. For Mia, the routine no longer felt exhausting. It felt like something to look forward to. Every night, Ethan was there waiting, sometimes with 2 cups of coffee, sometimes with a quiet smile that said more than words ever could. They had fallen into an unspoken rhythm, a ritual of shared silence and soft laughter as the world outside rushed by in streaks of light. One evening, the train was unusually quiet. The overhead lights flickered, and the air felt thick with anticipation, like a pause between heartbeats. Mia leaned her head against the cool window. "You know, this train feels like another world," she said. Everyone is going somewhere, but for a little while, we are all moving together. Ethan smiled. Maybe that is why I like it here. She looked at him curiously. You? You look like the kind of person who is always in a hurry. He laughed softly. You are not wrong, but lately, I have been trying to slow down. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out her sketchbook, which he had borrowed the night before to look through some of her work. I have been thinking about this, he said, flipping to a page filled with sketches of tired passengers, mothers with children, men sleeping in suits. Your art deserves more than this train. Mia blushed. It is just doodles. No, he said firmly. It is life. He hesitated before continuing. There is an event next weekend, a small exhibit at the Grand Central Gallery. I know someone who could help you display a few of your sketches. She stared at him in disbelief. Me? At Grand Central? That is not possible. It is, he said, his voice calm and certain. All you have to do is say yes. Her fingers tightened on the sketchbook. Ethan, I cannot. I would have to take time off work, pay for printing, framing. I will take care of it, he interrupted gently. She frowned. Why would you do that? He looked at her, eyes soft but serious. Because you reminded me what real things look like. I owe you more than you know. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the train filled the silence. Finally, she said quietly, I will think about it. He nodded, accepting that it was all he could ask for. Later that night, after he walked her to the station exit, Mia found herself unable to stop smiling. For the first time in years, her dreams did not feel unreachable. She opened her sketchbook on her kitchen table, tracing the lines of the drawing she had made of Ethan. There was something different in his face now when she remembered him, something she could not quite name. That weekend, she visited the gallery he had mentioned. She wanted to see it with her own eyes before making a decision. It was beautiful high ceilings, warm lights, people in elegant clothes sipping wine as they admired the art on the walls. She felt completely out of place, yet something about it pulled at her. In the center of the main hall stood a large poster for an upcoming charity exhibition sponsored by a name she had seen before, Coal Transit Group. She frowned, thinking the name sounded familiar, but she brushed it off. That night, on her way home, she texted Ethan for the first time. If that offer still stands, I am in. He replied within seconds. Good, you will not regret it. She smiled, holding her phone close, not realizing that the man she was trusting with her art was the same man behind the company name on that poster. As the train roared past her window, she whispered to herself, maybe some mistakes are meant to happen. Outside, the city lights shimmered, and for the first time in a long while, hope felt real. The night of the charity exhibition arrived sooner than Mia expected. She stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the simple navy dress she had borrowed from her coworker. It was not expensive, but it was the nicest thing she owned. Her hands trembled slightly as she slipped her sketchbook into her bag, the same one she always carried on the train. Outside, the city was glowing, and the evening air smelled like wet pavement and possibility. When she reached the gallery inside the Grand Central Terminal, her heart nearly stopped. The hall was stunning polished marble floors, chandeliers that looked like constellations, and guests who looked like they had stepped out of a magazine. She felt small but determined. She told herself she belonged there because her art was finally on those walls. Ethan was waiting near the entrance, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. When he saw her, his expression softened. You look beautiful, he said, and terrified. She laughed nervously. Both are true. He guided her through the crowd, stopping in front of a small display. There, framed in glass, were her sketches, drawings of commuters, workers, mothers, the quiet poetry of ordinary life. Her name was printed neatly on the plaque below, Mia Carter, guest artist. She stared at it, unable to speak. I changed your last name for tonight, Ethan whispered. It just sounded right with the theme. She smiled despite herself. You are impossible. As the evening went on, people stopped to admire her work. A reporter from a local magazine asked about her inspiration. Real people, she said simply. People who ride the same train every day but never really see each other. Ethan watched from a distance, pride flickering in his eyes. Yet beneath that pride was something heavier, a secret he knew could destroy the fragile trust between them. When the speeches began, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our event sponsor and tonight's guest of honor, Mr. Ethan Cole, CEO of Coal Transit Group. The room erupted in applause. Mia froze. The name echoed through her mind, connecting every missing piece: the business card, the logo on the poster, the small changes in his expression whenever she talked about struggling to afford a ticket. She turned to look at him, disbelief written all over her face. He stood on stage, perfectly composed, addressing the crowd with the confidence of someone who owned the very trains she rode every night. Her stomach twisted. She felt betrayed, exposed, and small again, smaller than she had ever felt before. Ethan glanced toward her mid-speech, their eyes meeting across the room. The warmth that once tied them together shattered in an instant. She could not hear his words anymore. The applause drowned everything. Her chest tightened, and she backed away slowly, slipping out of the crowd before he finished. Outside, the rain had started again. She ran through the terminal, the sound of her heels echoing on the marble floor. Her reflection flashed in the glass doors as she pushed them open and stepped into the storm. The cold rain stung her skin, but she barely felt it. She just kept walking, replaying every conversation, every moment of kindness, and realizing it had all been built on a lie. Ethan finished his speech to polite applause, but his eyes searched the crowd until he realized she was gone. Without hesitation, he left the stage, ignoring the murmurs of confusion from the guests. He rushed outside into the rain, scanning the street. In the distance, he caught a glimpse of her figure disappearing into the blur of umbrellas. "Mia," he called, but the city swallowed his voice. That night she did not take the train. She walked the long way home through the storm, the sketchbook pressed tightly against her chest. The same train that had brought them together now felt like a memory she could no longer bear to touch. The rain had stopped by morning, but the city still felt heavy. Mia woke to the dull ache that comes after crying, her sketchbook lying open beside her bed. The drawings looked different now, almost mocking her. Every line, every stroke, carried a memory of him, of a man who was never really who he said he was. She wanted to be angry, but the hurt ran deeper than anger. It was disappointment, not just in him but in herself for believing that someone from his world could ever truly understand hers. Days turned into weeks. She stopped taking the train altogether, choosing the slower bus instead. It took longer and cost more, but at least there were no reminders of him there. Each night she came home exhausted, sketchbook untouched, art supplies gathering dust on her table. One evening, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was short. "Mia, please. Let me explain. Just one conversation." She deleted it without replying. The next day another message appeared. "You once said the train was where people moved together, even if their destinations were different. You changed how I see everything. Please do not let this be the end." She ignored that one too, but her hands trembled as she put the phone down. A week later, she returned home from work to find a small envelope tucked under her door. Inside was a train ticket first class and a handwritten note that said, "One last ride, no cameras, no lies. Platform 7, 8 p.m. She almost threw it away, but something inside her whispered that she needed closure, even if it meant hearing words she did not want to believe. That evening, she went. The station looked the same as always, crowded and bright, the hum of conversation blending with the metallic rhythm of arrivals and departures. She stood at platform 7, unsure if she would actually board. Then she saw him. Ethan stood near the far end. No suit, no entourage, no hint of the polished billionaire the world knew. Just a man in a simple gray coat, holding a coffee cup in one hand and something else in the other, her old pencil, the one that had rolled under his seat weeks ago. When their eyes met, he smiled faintly, but his voice when he spoke was steady. "Thank you for coming." She folded her arms. "I almost didn't." "I know," he said. "You have every right to hate me. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." "Why didn't you?" she asked quietly. He took a deep breath. "Because for once, I wanted to be seen as a person, not a name, not a company, not a bank account. You looked at me like I was just a man on a train, and I wanted to keep that for a little longer." "That is not fair," she said, her voice shaking. "You took my story, my trust, and turned it into some kind of experiment." Ethan stepped closer, his expression pained. "It was never an experiment. I was selfish, yes, but everything I said, everything I felt, it was real." The train's whistle echoed through the platform, cutting the silence between them. He held out the pencil. "This was yours. I kept it as a reminder that not everything has to be perfect to be meaningful." Mia stared at it, unsure what to say. "You do not get to fix this with a pencil," she whispered. "I know," he said softly. But maybe I can start with the truth. He reached into his coat and handed her another envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "Something that belongs to you," he replied. "Open it when you are ready." The announcement called for final boarding. She turned to leave, but his next words stopped her. "Mia, I built an empire by moving people across cities, but you are the only one who made me stop moving long enough to feel alive." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she walked away, the envelope pressed to her chest, her heart torn between anger and something that still refused to die. Behind her, the train departed, carrying him into the night. That night, Mia sat at her kitchen table staring at the envelope Ethan had given her. The rain outside tapped gently against the window, as if urging her to open it. She hesitated, afraid of what might be inside. After a long breath, she slid her finger under the seal and pulled out a letter along with several documents. The first line stopped her cold. "To Mia Carter, rightful recipient of the Community Art Initiative grant." She blinked, reading again. The documents detailed a fund created under her name, a partnership between Cole Transit Group and a local arts foundation. The purpose was simple: to support artists from working-class backgrounds, beginning with her. Her art, her story, was the inspiration for the entire project. Her hands trembled. He had done all of this for her. Not for publicity, not for profit, but because he meant every word he had said about wanting to make things right. At the bottom of the letter was a short message in his handwriting. "You once dreamed of turning train stations into galleries. I may have borrowed that dream. Come to Platform 7 this Friday at 7 p.m. if you want to see it." Mia sat back, overwhelmed. She wanted to be angry, but instead she felt something else, a cautious pull of curiosity, and something warmer that she refused to name. Friday came. She almost convinced herself not to go, but when the clock struck 6:30, she found her feet moving toward the station anyway. The evening crowd was lighter than usual, the air filled with the hum of distant announcements and the faint sound of music echoing down the hall. As she reached Platform 7, she froze. The old train car that once carried tired commuters had been transformed. Through the wide glass windows, soft golden light spilled out. Inside, her drawings covered the walls, framed, lit, alive. Each sketch she had ever made of the people she had met on those late-night rides now hung as part of a traveling art gallery. Above the entrance, a small sign read, "The Lines Between Us, an exhibition by Mia Carter." Her breath caught in her throat. People were already inside, walking slowly along the aisle, admiring her work. Some were strangers. Others looked like the very people she had drawn. At the far end of the car stood Ethan, dressed simply, no bodyguards, no press, just him. When he saw her, his expression was gentle, unsure. "You came," he said softly. "I almost did not," she admitted. "But you always managed to surprise me." "I did not want to fix what I broke with money," he said. "I wanted to give your art a home. You once said people on the train never really see each other. Maybe now they will." She looked around at the faces, the smiles, the quiet emotion in the room. For the first time in months, she felt seen, not just as a struggling artist, but as someone who mattered. "Why would you do all this for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's gaze softened. "Because you reminded me that wealth means nothing if it does not create connection. You taught me that." She blinked away the tears building in her eyes. "You did not have to turn an entire train into a gallery to prove that." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I needed to remind myself, too." The soft sound of the train's engine filled the silence as it prepared for its first journey as a moving gallery. "It will travel across the city every day," he explained. "Each week, new artists will join." "But it began with you." Mia looked at him, the anger and sadness that once clouded her heart slowly melting away. "I do not know if I can forgive you completely," she said. "But this means something." Ethan nodded. "I can live with that." As the train doors closed behind them, the lights dimmed and the car began to move. The sketches swayed gently on the walls as if breathing. Mia watched the reflection of the city slide by, feeling, for the first time in a long time, that maybe she was finally on the right track. Months passed, and the gallery train became more than anyone expected. It traveled through the heart of the city every evening, carrying stories of ordinary people whose faces Mia once sketched in silence. Newspapers called it the art that moves, and for the first time in her life, Mia did not feel like she was chasing survival. She was living her dream. She spent her days curating new artists, her nights sketching in the same car that had once been just another ride home. Each framed piece told a story of compassion, struggle, and resilience, and people came not just to look, but to feel. Ethan kept his promise. He stayed quietly in the background, supporting the project without ever trying to take credit. Sometimes he joined her at the end of the route, standing beside her as the city lights passed by. Their conversations were gentler now, less about apology and more about possibility. One night, as the train rolled through the outskirts, Mia leaned against the window, watching reflections of the artwork shimmer under the dim lights. "Do you ever think about that first night?" she asked. "When I fell asleep on your shoulder?" Ethan smiled, his voice soft. "I think about it every time this train starts moving." She laughed quietly. "You never told me what you were listening to that night?" "You had those earphones in." He chuckled. "A podcast about finance. It was as boring as it sounds." She shook her head, smiling. "Figures." They fell silent, the kind of silence that no longer felt heavy. Outside, the train slowed near a stop, and a small crowd waiting on the platform waved as they passed. Some held signs that said, "Thank you for the art." Others pressed their hands to the glass. Mia turned to Ethan, her eyes glistening. "They are not here for me," she said softly. "They are here because they see themselves in what we built." Ethan nodded. That was always the point. When the train reached its final stop, the two of them stepped out together. The station was quiet now. Long after the crowds had gone, the air smelled of steel and rain, just like that first night. Mia turned to him. "You know, I spent so long thinking I hated you," she said. "But somewhere between the anger and the truth I found something else." He looked at her, waiting. "Gratitude," she said, "for the mistake that started all of this." Ethan's eyes softened. "If that mistake brought me here, then I would make it again." She smiled, her voice low. "Then maybe it was not a mistake at all." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, the old pencil she had used on the train. It was shorter now, almost worn down to the eraser. "You dropped this once," he said. "I kept it to remind myself that good things are fragile, and that is what makes them worth keeping." She took it, holding it between her fingers like a memory made solid. "Then maybe we both learned the same lesson," she said. "What lesson is that?" he asked. "That real love, like art, is not about perfection. It is about seeing beauty in the flaws." The last train of the night pulled in, the headlights washing the platform in silver light. Mia looked at him for a long moment before resting her head gently on his shoulder, just as she had that very first night. This time, it was not exhaustion or chance that brought her there. It was choice. Ethan let out a quiet breath, his hand brushing against hers. "We came full circle," he whispered. She smiled. "No," she said softly. "We just found the right track." The voiceover faded with the low hum of the departing train and a single line that carried their story's truth. The first time she fell asleep on a stranger's shoulder, it was an accident. The second time, it was home.